The presenting sponsor for On Education is Schoology. Schoology is not only the best learning management system, it's also a community of lifelong learners. Join On Education at Schoology Next Conference, July 16th through 18th in San Diego, California. This is a chance to immerse yourselves in hands-on workshops, advanced product training sessions, and best practice presentations. If you want to learn more about Schoology and how they can help you advance what's possible, visit Schoology.com.
Cool story.
Let's do it again. All right, I thought you were going to jump in.
Welcome to On Education. I'm Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an amazing pod for you today. There's been a pretty big development in the upcoming Ontario election we want to dive into. We'll share some listener feedback and cap off the show talking to educator and NDP candidate for Barrie-Innisfil, Pekka Reinio. But first, happy Mother's Day. I want to say, yes, happy Mother's Day. My mom's name is Martha Irvin, and I want to tell her, first of all, that I love her very much, and I'm super proud to be her son. And happy Mother's Day. She's an amazing mom.
Does your mom listen to the podcast?
My mom does not listen to the podcast. I'm not even sure my mom knows what a podcast is.
Get her an iPhone.
No, she has an iPhone. And I usually begin whenever I speak at any conferences. She's just recently learned how to text. You know, she always used to call. You know?
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting concept because my mom is a second language learner of English.
Yes,
so she has this really funny way of, she uses text language that's a mixture of Spanish and English, right? and so sometimes I'm not exactly sure what she's even telling me. And then she also has a interesting way of mixing up exclamation points and question marks. So then some statements end up being like I love you, question mark, you know?
Question mark.
It's like, I may love you, I may not love you. So that's the beginning of usually one of my little speeches that I give at conferences, is I show text messages my mom has recently sent me, and whether or not she loves me or not, it's still a question mark. We don't know. Yeah.
It's funny.
So how about you, man?
My mom listens to the podcast.
Oh, great.
Happy Mother's Day, Mommy. I was talking to her this morning, and it's funny because she was talking about the podcast. She's like, I don't know all the things you talk about. I just like to hear your voice.
Oh.
And I'm like, shucks.
That's awesome.
It was sweet. It's nice. And my mom is amazing. She's been the best. She's fun to be around, which I love. And we don't see her as much as we would like because we live so far away and we're incredibly busy.
Sure.
But I love you, Mom, nonetheless. And obviously our wives, we should definitely say
yes.
Happy Mother's Day to our
Happy
wives.
Mother's Day to our wives, who are amazing people for putting up with us.
The mother of, you have two boys. And
I have two boys.
And I have two boys. So
yes. And
mothers of boys, all of them.
Exactly. And not only do they have their boys, but then they have us too.
Yeah.
We're basically like kids too.
And I thought about you a lot today, I guess, because you're not home on the weekends, and you do this with me for like 2 hours on Sunday, almost 3 hours on Sunday sometimes, and your time is pretty precious. I try to respect your time when you're home on the weekends.
Sure.
That must be hard for her during the weeks and stuff when you're not there. And
it's been a journey, and
yeah.
as life usually is, and we're excited about this next phase of our
right.
of our lives. We're gonna we're moving in June, so that should
together
be
again.
Awesome. Yep, and we're gonna be together again, and it was part of the sacrifice. You do stuff as you go through life to make your lives better, or just to go pursue your passions, as we've talked about before. And then I just wanted to make sure, too, we say Happy Mother's Day to all of our mothers out there that listen to our podcast. And Thank you so much for spending time with us.
I have at least a bunch of new stuff. I got new toys this week.
I do, too. We're like living in the cool equipment here. Tell us about the equipment that you have now working.
So I bought a pass-through box for going from a brand new microphone. So we got a Rode Procaster microphone. It's super, I mean, top of the line, as top of the line as you can get. And it goes into a pass-through box for USB. It can also more finely tune like the levels, the volume levels. We both got MacBooks because we're going to be traveling. So we both got MacBooks so that we can take them to Schoology Next and to ISTE. And we have basically a mobile recording studio now. We can go anywhere.
We're ready to go.
I bought some acoustic panels to try to dumb down some of the. I have a slight echo, so things are looking up in on education land.
Yes,
I'm feeling pretty darn good about it. Obviously, I can't hear what I sound like until we release the podcast, but
you sound great.
Thanks, buddy. You sound pretty good too.
I think our listeners will be able to tell the difference, though. I can already tell the difference. Your mic is rocking it. Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, I went from like a $79 mic to an almost $400 mic that weighs easily like 10 pounds. That's the heaviest thing. Like you could lift weights with this thing.
I know, they're heavy.
And I bought I have a little boom, mini boom. For now, we ordered arms.
Yes.
But my arm isn't here yet. So I had to go rush out today and get a little boom stand to sit it on my desk because I had nothing to sit this mic on. And the mic is so heavy, and because it's leaning towards one side, that it's almost like if I rock the desk a little bit, it's going to lean. The boom is going to fall over because the mic is so heavy.
It's heavy, yes.
But really excited about all of this stuff. We've had our eyes on this equipment since the beginning, and we just had to wait till we had the money to do it all. And we couldn't do this without people listening. And I mean, I mentioned on Twitter this morning. If you noticed on Twitter, if you check us out at On Education Pod, you'll see that we've already passed our April downloads number.
Isn't that amazing?
And we're only in the 12th. Well, we passed it yesterday, so the 12th day of May.
So in 12 days, 2 episodes, basically.
Yeah. So we are moving. So please keep sharing and telling people about it. It's super exciting. Speaking of super exciting,
yes,
I'm going to Chicago tomorrow.
Woo! Yes.
Chi-town. With our grade 7s and 8s.
How far of a trip is that, Mike?
It's a long drive, man. It's 8.5 hours. I have my MacBook will be charged up, my iPad will be charged up, and my phone, and I'm bringing an external power pack.
Do you guys go on a bus?
We go on a bus.
Okay. Like a school bus or like a charter bus?
No, like a charter bus.
Oh, that's nice. Thank goodness.
I couldn't handle going on a school bus.
Yeah,
that would
rough.
be brutal. That would be brutal. So, no, we take the bus to Chicago. I have to be at school at 6:30 tomorrow morning.
Sure.
Or 6:15 tomorrow morning. So that means I have to leave at 5:15. Means I'm up at 4:45 tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. We both are going to be up early.
Yeah, you're leaving early too.
Exactly.
So we are going to Chicago. We've got a full itinerary of things to do. We're going to see the Blue Man Group, which is like our big entertainment thing.
That is really cool.
Which I'm excited about. Sometimes they've went to baseball games, which I would have loved. I'm a huge baseball fan.
Sure.
I would have loved to have seen a Chicago Cubs game or a... actually, that's what we should do at IST. We should go to a Cubs game, Glenn.
You know how hard that is to get tickets, though? But
yes.
we know people now. We're going to ask some people. If any of you guys have tickets, hook us up.
Hook some brothers up.
Yes.
We need to go see the Cubs. That's a bucket list thing for
I've
me.
never been there either.
No, me neither. We go on this trip every year. The 7s and 8s go on a trip to the U.S. every year for 4 days. It usually rotates between Boston, New York, and Chicago.
Okay.
I don't think they've been anywhere else other than Boston, New York, and Chicago. Maybe Philadelphia. Philadelphia would be great. Philadelphia is beautiful. If you've ever been to Philadelphia, Philadelphia is gorgeous. It was not what I was expecting at all when I went. When I went to IST 2015.
Yeah.
It was in Philadelphia.
Okay.
The trip is worth 10% of their mark, so I didn't know if you had thoughts on this. I mean, the idea that these kids have to go, which is interesting.
So they're required to go, and it's actually worth 10% of their grade. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And actually, you know what? What an awesome experience. I mean, that's truly where you you remember those moments of what
Yeah.
remember when we went to Chicago, remember when we went to New York, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Those kind of trips are just awesome. My own two sons this week are taking field trips, like maybe up to the Twin Cities, but nothing like what you're talking about, which is just, those are magical trips. So that's awesome.
We're going everywhere. We're going to the Chicago History Museum.
Yes.
We're doing the architectural boat tour. There's a boat tour. We're doing some sort of a gangster tour of some sort, an organized crime tour, which is interesting.
So a big question, Mike, that our audience probably would have for you, I'm just predicting this, is how do you guys end up paying for that? Are you is it the school funding it, or is it
No.
is it the kids funding it?
So this is one of the only things, like we've over the last few years, our school has really made a concerted effort to pay for everything.
Sure.
So over the last couple of years, they've really streamlined. I guess it has some inconsistencies and inconveniences, but every purchase goes through the buyer. Where in the past, teachers were allowed to buy things and then expense them and stuff like that.
Okay.
But there was less control over what actually was being used and how it was being used. And the school really wanted to get a sense of what was money being spent on so that they could pay for everything.
Okay.
So that, tuition was all inclusive, which is a good thing, I think. I think that the bad thing about some private schools is that, you pay your tuition, but then you have a minimum donation requirement. Sure. And then you have, especially the social expectations, right? For things like contributing to the fundraising event in September, and then, inevitably the fundraising event in May, and then the Christmas extravaganza, whatever, blah, 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 Gala Ball 2018.
Sure. Lots of expenses.
Right. And there's all of these things that just keep adding up. And with us at our school anyways, we don't do that. We charge you the tuition. And that's it.
Yes.
And you don't really pay for anything else. So anyways, this is the only thing that I can think of that's substantial, other than uniforms, I guess, that the students pay for, the families pay for out of pocket. Now, we're a private school. Almost everyone at our school has enough money to afford this at various levels. Sure. It's not, there are people that have more money than other people, and there are certainly, I'm thinking of at least one family that has 3 kids that go to our school. And that's a lot of money. That's almost $60,000.
Yes.
In tuition.
Yes.
And it's that's a choice. It becomes a choice at that point that they say, we have $80,000 in disposable income. What are we going to do with that? Are we going to go on bonkers trips to Vegas and Europe for a month in the summer and do all of this crazy stuff and have a 7,000 square foot house? Or are we going to spend our $60,000 on our kids to get this, what I would say is a really awesome, high caliber education? And they choose that. And I respect that. Sure. I respect that a lot. I work at a private school, and I'm a member of a party that is hardcore into public education. So I straddle the divide pretty gingerly.
It's an interesting thing, though, too, for us that are public school teachers to listen to. What is it like? What are your situations? In this case, you have an opportunity to be able to take these educational trips. Not that we don't do this in the United States. I took students every other year for probably 7 times. I went down to Costa Rica, and it was all student paid.
Dude, that would be amazing.
Yeah, and so and it eventually, after a few times down there, we would streamline the trip as far as we didn't even need the tour guides, because I already knew the tour now, and then now I could just run it myself. And
so
then,
it becomes way cheaper.
Yeah, cut out some expenses of those kinds of things, and then be able to choose the things that I knew that the kids would enjoy the most. But they paid it out of pocket, and a couple of $1,000 for a summer trip is expensive. You know, you have to do some fundraising, or you have to do some things, or you have to just save some money. You know, and some of the kids did and do work and do some different things so that they are able to do that. Because I think those you will never forget those experiences.
Yeah. We don't do any fundraising either, which, I mean, in some ways I've never necessarily liked. I think that our parents are generally generous.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. I asked for Lego once. I do a grade 5 Lego stop motion project.
Yeah.
That is stop motion video tied with social studies. So they have a theme. It could be this year we're doing Greece, ancient Greece, but the Greece Olympics or Alexander the Great, and they have to tell me a story about Alexander the Great using Lego stop motion, and they make a Lego stop motion video, and then they do voiceover and stuff. But we found the first year I did it, we found that they let me go buy a whole bunch of Lego. They gave me like $300, and I went and bought a whole bunch of Minecraft Lego sets because it had the best kind of combination of kind of normal stuff.
Yes.
Not like Star Wars. Star Wars has like a lot of techie stuff. I just wanted like grass and flowers and people and like Steves. I just wanted a whole bunch of little Steves that people could use and stuff like that. But I still was running out of Lego like crazy.
Yeah.
Because I had 3 grade 5 classes. I basically
get a lot of kids. 75
kids. So I asked for Lego, and man, did I get Lego. I have 10 giant, probably, I don't know how to, in terms of volume, I don't know how to, it probably, each bin probably holds about 5 pounds of Lego.
Wow.
And I have 10 of these bins full of Lego.
Yeah.
All different things, shapes, sizes, flats. We went and bought some extra like 2-inch or 24-inch by 24-inch flats for them to put their scenes on. But parents gave me Lego, and I have so much of it now. I was thinking, I went and told the principal this. I'm like, man, if we wanted 3D printers, why don't we just say we want to buy a 3D printer, but they're like $7,000 for like the really big one that we want to build. Like we want to build like big stuff on it, or even like these little ones, like the MakerBot.
Yes, yeah.
The MakerBot ones are like $4,000.
Yeah, that's expensive.
You buy 2 of them and you're at $8,000. But I bet you I could get $8,000 for a 3D printer in about 3 days.
Jeez.
With our school, for sure. I'd have parents buying us one, just buying it straight up, and you know. So sometimes I wish we'd do that. But anyways, I digress. Twitter.
Yes.
Did anything happen for you? I wrote what I saw on Twitter.
Yeah, we can just talk about that.
Okay, so and the guys will be really excited that we're talking about this. I know
Absolutely.
they will.
Let's advertise this. I love it.
So hashtag esportsedu.
Yes,
is what came up this week, and it was the first esports edu chat. Dr. Chris Haskell from Boise State University led it. And it was fun. I got into it a little bit. I was a little bit late, but I definitely read everything, and I chimed in at the end. Any thoughts that you have about that?
I just think that it is not only the next big thing, but it's going to be happening here very, very soon. At not only it's happening already at the university level and somewhat at the secondary high school type of level here in the United States. But it will be what is going to be the next big thing. And what Dr. Haskell, his really interesting take on it is basically saying this is the time to get in on it so that you can develop the strategies and the coaching techniques and all of those philosophies, you know, those kinds of things that you would develop when a sport it's in its infancy. So a lot of people will be like, are you talking about video games? You're playing them as competitive sports? And it's like, yes. And we already know that is an industry that's booming right now, which is competitive gaming. And people make a lot of money doing that. And there's a lot of corporate sponsors because it's very popular.
It's incredibly entertaining too.
Yes.
Like if you haven't go to Twitch and just watch something anytime too, because it's happening almost every day at this point, a big event.
Oh yeah.
Just go and watch it, and like you will be almost as mesmerized as you are watching baseball or football or hockey or soccer or whatever. I guarantee you will be.
Yeah, and so it's super interesting, like you had put here, and I think that anybody that's interested in starting a program, reach out to, for example, Steve Isaacs and Dr. Chris Haskell. And there's many other leaders out there that are taking the lead here and then guiding other people so that they can start their own programs, whether it be at the high school level or it be at the college level.
I was so I chimed in at the end and brought up one of my passions, I guess, which is Civilization, the game Civilization, the history game, and I started to think about non-traditional esports. So esports has typically been League of Legends, Overwatch, Fortnite now, I guess.
Yep. And
even like World of Tanks has an esports league. So really like hyper competitive, mostly like, I wouldn't say violent, but like combat type games, right? But Civilization has multiplayer. And it is a game where you would compete with other players if you were in that scenario. And the idea that you could play Civilization and play as one nation versus another nation, and the way that Civilization is designed, there are specialized units, there are specialized traits for the leaders. Like if you choose Gandhi, you have a different trait than if you have Winston Churchill.
Sure.
Or whoever.
Which is really cool. I love those concepts, yes.
Right. So
a lot of strategy involved in that.
Totally. And you could play... there's actually... And I wish the name wasn't escaping me at the moment, but one of the leaders in the pioneers of game-based learning, in addition to a few others, he wrote his PhD dissertation on using Civilization 3 in education.
Yeah.
And I read it like once a year just to kind of remind myself of that we shouldn't be limiting ourselves to what's possible in this space. But the idea that you could like play a game of Civilization with students and then talk about the outcome at the end. Why did you win? What helped you win? What do you think your nation had that contributed to winning? How can you relate that to the real world? How can you relate that to the history? Like, using that in history class would be amazing, because especially if you had like a higher level, like grade 10s or 11s, that could like really dive into this from an inquiry level. They could really say, I think that the Mongols were really successful in this game because they had these horse archers that were super powerful and super fast, and Mongols were historically incredibly accurate with bows, that it took very little effort to beat someone on a battlefield, because they had all of these things combined together, and their military tactics were like no one has ever seen. And that's what happened in my game, and that's what happened in reality.
That's what happened in real life. Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And to connect those two things would be absolutely phenomenal. Like, I would cry. I would get so emotional about like someone bringing something like that up and playing Civilization. Seems to be like another way that we could tackle this esports idea. So I definitely loved the conversation. I want to participate in it more. Hashtag esports edu.
And they happen on Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I just looked it up just to make sure we had it. So Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. It's a half-hour weekly chat. If you're interested in it, jump in there and just join the community there, because it's a lot of top game-based learning educators that are right on the leading edge of this.
Well, and speaking, this is the absolute leading edge of education. This is out there. There's going to be people that when you say you talked about esports and its relation to education, they're going to think you're crazy.
You're wild.
A little bit.
You're on the edge.
And that's awesome. This is beyond outside of this is outside of being outside of the box, and that's where you want to be. To be honest, that's where I want to be.
Absolutely.
And so join that chat because it was pretty fun. And just thinking about the possibilities got me really excited. So much so that I wanted to put it in the podcast to give it a shout out. When we come back, we're going to talk about the latest in politics, but we are definitely going to take a dive into my election that's happening in Ontario and talk about some of the big developments happening there.
The end of the school year is finally here, and we have an awesome professional development opportunity. Badge Summit 2018 is happening at Columbia College on June 23rd in Chicago, Illinois. This one-day event brings together some of the brightest and most inspiring digital badge thought leaders on the planet for highly interactive learning and sharing. Attendance is limited to 250 people, so get signed up. For more information, go to badgesummit.weebly.com.
All right, welcome back to the show. We're going to cover some of the latest in politics, and we normally use this section to talk about the walkouts and things that had been happening in the U.S. But again, like we reminded you last week in the podcast, there is an election happening in Ontario, and education, maybe even shockingly, has become a bit of an issue here. And so there's been some news, and we're going to talk to Pekka Reinio in a little bit. But there's been some news, and we wanted to talk about that. And this comes straight from the headlines that EQAO is the Elementary Teachers Foundation of Ontario. They are the main elementary teachers union for Ontario public education, has endorsed the NDP in the Ontario election.
So last week you were explaining to us, Mike, that the Liberal Party is the governing party, and
Yes.
the NDP
Yes.
is a different party that basically is gaining some momentum, and they have at the center point of a lot of their agendas are educational issues, correct?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's definitely one big issue that they stand very strong in contrast with the other parties. That's for sure.
And so, like, a union supporting this, how
Yeah.
big of a deal is this? Like, this big union is the main union.
It is the union.
Yes.
So I don't want to get like I don't want to use like wicked rhetoric or anything. I want it, but this is historic. Like, this is a big friggin' deal. I can't remember the last time EQAO endorsed the NDP. They've almost always endorsed the Liberal Party. It's a massive win. Massive, huge, beyond big. I would say that almost all, and it's funny, I was talking to my wife is actually who sent this to me. She sent me a text message that she had gotten, in her email,
Yeah.
that the EQAO was going to announce that, because my wife's a public school teacher.
Sure.
So I'm a private school teacher, so I'm not in the union, I'm not unionized, but my wife is.
Okay.
So she got notice that EQAO was going to endorse the NDP just like half an hour before it happened. And I said, "This is gigantic," and she said, "Yeah." And then I sent it like right away to you. But almost all teachers follow the guidance of EQAO in terms of who they vote for.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's the same dynamic in the U.S. Is it? Do you know?
Not necessarily. No, I'm a big member of Education Minnesota, which would be our state union.
What would you put as a percentage of teachers? Like, if you had to guess, what is the percentage of teachers that would basically follow the guidance of their union in terms of who they vote for?
This is a total guess, but I would say 70%.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the other 30%, the only reason why I'm putting it as that is they may vote for a different candidate, right?
Yeah.
Or they may not vote. So
Right.
they may just, that they may not be active enough to where they're actually in voting, even though they are part of the union.
Sure. So if I had to guess at our number, I would say it's 80 to 85%
Okay.
of teachers follow the guidance of the ETFO, whoever ETFO endorses. And I can say pretty strongly that ETFO has been very instrumental in the Liberals holding on to their governing power. So this is a gigantic shift. It's going to be felt all over the place, and because when you get the power of a union this big, you don't just get like their endorsement and some newspaper articles and some radio and whatever. You get their people, and you get their organizational structure.
Yes.
And you get their phone banking in some cases.
Yes.
And you get like an endorsement this big is absolutely gigantic. This is a seismic shift in the allegiance. And I'll be honest, I'm surprised that ETFO took this long to endorse the NDP. NDP have always been historically the union party in terms of like where a lot of like labor support has come from.
Okay.
It goes back to like the social democracy and stuff like that, right? And just like the labor. So social democracy and labor have a lot in common and have always generally been aligned. And so we have a lot of alignment there. But I don't know why ETFO, and to be honest, I have never voted Liberal.
Okay.
So I've never understood it. Even as a someone who was wanting to be a teacher and then became a teacher, I've never followed ETFO's endorsement. I would say my wife probably has once or twice. We don't generally talk about who we're voting for. I know my wife is voting NDP this year. Because the choices are just so absolutely stark in contrast.
Sure. between
especially the three main contenders. But it's absolutely huge. And I'll be honest, one of the things that should be brought up is that this shouldn't be a surprise to the Liberals. The Liberals shouldn't be shocked that this happened. The Liberal government has had a history of being terrible at treating public service. They've got a history of basically screwing public service in almost any way that they can possibly do it. They've consistently drafted back to work legislation. You're gonna hear a little bit about that related to when we talk to Pekka. They've consistently drafted back to work legislation to force groups they can't come to an agreement with to go back to work without a deal.
Yeah.
The main one in this specific related to the elementary teachers is called Bill 115. If you want to look it up on the internet, and you totally should, because you should see how ridiculous this is. It's called the Putting Students First Act, which is, I almost swore there just a second ago. I don't want to change the rating on the podcast, but it's insane to call it even the Putting Students First Act. But basically, what happened was the FO and the government were negotiating the collective bargaining agreement, and because public school is paid for by the government, you negotiate with the government. That's who you're negotiating with, or in this case, against, I guess. And the government didn't like the terms, couldn't come to an agreement, was not interested in compromise. So all they did was they drafted back to work legislation. They said, okay, screw you guys. We're going to just put you back to work no matter what, without a contract. And that was so bad because in 2016, Bill 115 was ruled unconstitutional.
Wow.
I was telling you about this off air.
Yes.
So Bill 115 was ruled unconstitutional in 2016. So any money that the Liberal Party saved by imposing a contract on teachers is now being spent in reparations for an unconstitutional back to work legislation. They're literally paying back teachers for all the lost wages that they would have won under binding mediation.
So, Mike, just to make sure we're following you here. So there is basically kind of this backlash now There's this feeling of, hey, why did you guys do this to us? We actually were supporting you.
Yep.
And then now
that's exactly it.
You didn't support us through this, in this case, this contract negotiations. And instead you just said, nope, you just get to go back to work and you're doing it on our terms, even though they were put into power basically because of this strong union. And so now they're moving away from that specific party, the Liberal Party, and supporting the NDP.
That's exactly
okay.
it. This is retribution at its finest. This is karmic justice, my friends.
It's interesting. I mean, the most interesting part of all this political talk, is that it's not this two-party talk, number one. And number two, that you're talking about parties that are basically on the left side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is so interesting to me. I mean, and kind of very jealous over here about that. Really, educational issues are on the front burner, and that educators do have a high place, as far as in your province and with the people in your community, and obviously with your legislators.
Yeah, I mean, every time teachers go on strike, there's a backlash against the teachers. I think that one of the reasons is that teachers definitely get paid a lot more in Canada, in particular in Ontario, than they do in most places in the U.S. The average teacher salary, if I had to guess, it'd probably be around $55,000 or $65,000.
Sure.
So, and after 10 years teaching, a teacher makes about $105,000 a year.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty good money.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't live on that, then I don't know what.
No, but I'm just saying that's good, though. I mean, that's where it should be. I'm laughing because it just, it's such a difference here,
So, I mean, this is they deserve this. I'm so happy to say. Listen, if my bias isn't showing yet, I don't know what else I need to do. But I mean, obviously, I should disclose before Pekka even comes on that I'm involved in the NDP in a couple different ways.
Sure.
I didn't disclose it in the interview, but I do want to mention it somewhere. And I've been an NDP member for many, many years. But it's mostly been about social issues for me, in the sense that and education being one of them. The idea that we have a moral obligation to fund teachers and schools and education as much as we can humanly possibly do. Education should be incredibly expensive. Incredibly expensive. It should be the most expensive thing that society does, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
And listen, when people are smarter, when people generally have a higher level of knowledge, they're safer, they're healthier,
happier,
they're more successful, the economy is better. So, when I say education should be the most expensive thing, I'm not exaggerating. I think that education should cost more than healthcare. Because if you invest in education, people will be healthier.
Oh,
they
totally
will
agree.
be, because they will make smarter choices about their bodies and how they treat them and what they do. And so society in general will be better because of that. Like, I'm not saying that healthcare should be cut. I'm just saying that we should be spending way more in education right now than we are, especially in the United States.
Oh God, yeah.
And and you will see society, raise themselves up at talking about intersectionality. Society will be better in almost every way if our education is better in every way.
It's a good point. I love that as the end.
So we're going to come back in a few minutes, and we have some feedback. We have some listener feedback, which is awesome. We have a story for Teacher Appreciation Week, and we have a story about change, some thoughts on changing your roles related to what I talked about last week.
On Education is brought to you by Audible, but I don't have anything to listen to right now, Mike, so what should I download on Audible?
So let me give you a wicked recommendation. This is another book narrated by the great, amazing, awesome Will Wheaton.
Oh, I'm excited.
It's called What If? Serious Scientific Answers to Absurd Hypothetical Questions.
That sounds awesome.
I've listened to this book 3 times now. It's by Randall Munroe. Randall Munroe is the author of the XKCD comic.
Okay.
If you've ever watched or looked at that. But it is hysterical. It's awesome. It's so smart. And you should totally listen to it because Will Wheaton reads it like a champ.
Awesome. So if you guys want to create an account on Audible today, you can visit audibletrial.com/oneducation and you'll receive a free audiobook on us. Free.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. Teacher Appreciation Week was this past week, and we asked for some shout-outs, some ideas on teachers that you had respected or made an impact on you, and we got some of those, and we wanted to share one. Glen's going to share a shout-out from Steel Citron.
Yes, Steel Citron writes this. Hello, I am a current high school sophomore wanting to give a shout-out to my freshman English teacher, Mr. John C. Fallon, by the way, I love John, for being a fantastic educator. Throughout last year, Mr. Fallon's curriculum surpassed the typical monotonous English course because of his ability to add relevance to every subject or theme we focused on. By the way, Steele, that's a fantastic statement you just made there. I love his writing. He goes on. Recognizing the importance of digital media in this day and age, Mr. Fallon constantly had us question the reliability of digital news, and he connected these themes of deception to the classical literary device of unreliable narrators. Perfectly merging ideas in classical literature to modern issues made the class a truly incredible experience. However, Mr. Fallon also was a great mentor and guide outside the classroom as well. As the leader of our school board's game elective, board game elective, Mr. Fallon shared his passions with his students, creating a space at school that allowed students to explore their nerdy side without the fear of judgment. Not only has Mr. Fallon helped me to shape both my writing skills and my ability to navigate through the unreliable narrators of the world, but he has also pushed me to become my best true self, and his presence and effort as an educator have made a tremendous difference in my life. Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Man, that's fantastic. I mean, just the writing there, not only what he says about John Fallon, but just the writing there, I'm blown away.
Fantastic writing.
Yes, and
also John taught this person to write really well.
That's what I mean. I mean, what a tribute there. Not only is he saying all these wonderful things about John's class and how he's inspired him, but my goodness, the writing is amazing.
This is all the good things that teachers should be.
Yes.
It was pretty awesome to read.
Oh, love it. How about you?
I've always wanted to teach a lesson or two on fake news, especially the last couple of years, and this unreliable narrators idea, and the idea of connecting it, this idea of pulling up Breitbart and then pulling up whatever you wanted to reference in terms of unreliable narrators in literature, would be absolutely amazing.
And he also he has a video game too, you know that, right? That he uses. And it's not your typical video game.
Is this the Edith Finch thing?
No, this one's the one, it's called Her Story. And it's based, I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I own it. I've never played it, but I own it. I own all the games.
Yeah, so, of course. 287 games in my library. No, but he uses Her Story, a video game, and they play it all together. So it's not like each individual kid plays it, but they play it as a class. And he has amazing blog posts about how he teaches the unreliable narrator, connects it to literature, like this kid just said, connects it to real life happening, like what you just talked about, and then has this game to kind of pull it all together. And can you really tell, is she actually telling the truth or not? So it's really awesome. But I'll let you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Her Story is a what is it? Like a real video, like it's real people being filmed.
Yep, it's this one person, and you're not sure exactly what she tells you is she's being interviewed kind of in a police office, in a police interrogation room, and she's telling all of these different stories, and some of them are true and some of them are not, and it's your job to figure out which narrative is the right, the truth, and what is she spinning,
Man, that's brilliant.
Yes. So tell us about Rick Bray.
So listen, first off, Mr. Fallon, congratulations. This is awesome. You're clearly the best.
Yes.
And keep up the awesome work. You deserve every adulation you can possibly get. So I put it out there last week that I was dealing with some significant change in terms of my role at my job, and that I had never taught anything other than what I was teaching right now.
Yeah.
So we got a message about that, which was really nice, because I need all of the messages I can get, because I'm still kind of in a bit of a rut, I guess, about it. I have days where I'm feeling pretty good, and then days where I'm not so feeling pretty good. So I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's huge, and Rick Bray is who sent it to me. But I think he would feel fine with me not reading it all, because he mentions actually how long it is. but he writes about him changing positions from teaching high school students, teaching chemistry, to being an instructional technology integrator for the region. And one of the things that he dealt with was the social aspect of being in a school, like constantly, and being a teacher at the school, as opposed to being an administrator or someone that isn't in the classroom all the time.
Sure.
And one of the things he was proud of with his work was being known and being liked and being respected by his students, that he had formed a lot of positive relationships with his students, and it took 13 years to build up all of this goodwill, and he says, it took 18 months for it all to vanish, in the sense that, he felt like he wasn't recognized in the halls anymore as the years went on, and he wasn't teaching. People didn't identify him, and felt like strangers.
Sure.
In the hallways, and he gets said hi to, when he's out at the grocery store or whatever, doing whatever in his normal life, by former students, but these current students didn't have the same connection to him. But one of the things he kind of turned it around, and he reminded me that he was doing incredibly positive things in the classroom. He was helping teachers integrate technology, and he writes this: in many cases, when I walked into the room, I heard comments like, "Last year you did XYZ with us, and that was so cool. What are we doing today?" And I've also heard parents in both districts share with me how much they appreciated helping their child share the work they created, and tell me that not only did their child talk about that project for months, but they also learned so much as a result. And so he really turned it around and said, even though I'm not with students every single day, I'm still having a super positive impact on these kids. And they're remembering the work we did together, even though I'm not their everyday teacher.
Yes.
And so
exactly.
His final note to me was to keep looking forward, to find the positive things, and to realize that you're making a difference in the world no matter what you're doing. It was a pretty awesome note, and thanks to Rick for sending it through, because I was super happy to read it. So yeah, that was really, really good. So we've got a lot of feedback. If you ever want us to read something, send us a note, have some comments, ideas, concerns, whatever you want to send us. If you go to oneducationpodcast.com and go down to the bottom of the page, you'll see a section that says talk to us. You can send us a message. I take a look at that spreadsheet every week, and we will talk about whatever you want to talk about if there's something to talk about.
Yeah, we want to hear from you guys.
Absolutely. When we come back, we're going to speak to Barrie-Innisfil NDP candidate Pekka Reinio. All right, well, welcome back. We're thrilled to have on the pod our first of what we hope to be many relevant education-centric candidates from this year's Ontario provincial election, Pekka Reinio. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Nice to be here, and thanks. Nice to chat with you too, Glen.
And we're in the studio, such as it is. This is the den. So this is our first. Pekka and I are in the same room. Glen and I never talked together in the same room until this summer, I guess. So this is exciting.
Right on.
Awesome.
Very exciting.
First, Pekka, thanks for coming on. Could you give our listeners a little bit of a bio? Tell us about yourself and the journey that you took to bring you to running for office.
Right, thanks, okay. I've been in Barrie and Innisfil for the last 20 years. I've been involved municipally here on many different elections, same with the provincial politics. So I've had a keen interest in politics for a long time. I actually grew up in Thunder Bay, which is traditionally NDP country. I moved to Toronto for about 10 years, and then I moved up to Barrie-Innisfil in the late 1990s. So I've always been interested in politics, and I've had family members who have run for municipal politics, and it was nice to see the behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on there. And so when this opportunity came up last summer to be the president of our riding, I jumped at that opportunity. And then the opportunity to run for the candidacy came up. Again, I jumped for that because I thought, what a great opportunity to make a difference in our community. So I've been interested in politics for a long time. This is a great chance for us to do something good for our community.
Totally. So just to clarify for our American friends again, if you haven't listened to last week's episode where I did a bit of a Ontario Politics 101, when Pekka says riding, that's our local association, our local group, just like you would have in a constituency zone or area. And Pekka's running as a representative for one of those areas in our provincial legislature, which would be like your state house of representatives, I suppose. So we went over the parties last week, and I did a very broad and general left-right spectrum of the PCs, the Liberals, the Greens, and the NDP.
Sure.
And I talked about kind of where everyone stands. And you're obviously the NDP candidate for this area.
Yes.
So why the NDP? Is there something specific that drew you to them? And when did you begin to align yourself with them, and why?
I guess it would have to go back to when I was in attendance at university. That was the era of Ed Broadbent and Brian Mulrooney.
Sure.
And that was the big battle in that 1988 election. And Ed Broadbent, an NDP leader, was had an agenda that I really liked and appreciated. And I think since then I've become aligned with the NDP. I like their stance on many issues, and I support their issues. I've been a great supporter of the NDP for a long time over the years.
Awesome.
So, Pekka, as a candidate, you must have some thoughts on what you would do if you actually won. So, do you have any projects or goals that you want to focus on as an MPP?
Well, thanks for that question, Glenn. I think there's probably 4 different areas that I can think of right off the bat where I wanted to have some make an impact. I guess one would be education, of course. Mm-hmm. I am a teacher. I've been a teacher for over 20 years, and I think our education system here in Ontario is very good. However, our education system here can have some improvements, and one of my goals as an MPP would be to introduce some improvements to our education. We have a funding formula here in Ontario that provides money to schools and school boards depending on population, and I don't think that's a very good way to spend money in terms of supporting students who might need a little bit of extra help. So we have plans to change the funding formula so that we put money where it's needed most, not by just simply population. So that's one thing in education.
Interesting.
I'm also very interested in our math program and literacy and introducing more science and the arts. So again, looking at some of those different areas of the curriculum and make sure we have a balanced curriculum for our students. Two big parts of our platform here in Ontario are hydro and healthcare, and those are two that I'm very passionate about as well. You know, our hydro used to be publicly owned, but a while back, the Conservatives got it started with privatization, and the Liberals have very fully embraced that. And now we have a mostly privately owned hydro system here, which has caused our prices to skyrocket. So part of our plan as the NDP would be to bring hydro back under public control so that the hydro is working for the people of Ontario, not for shareholders and CEOs and executives. You know, they can privatize a lot of different things, but not our essential services like hydro and healthcare. And healthcare, again, is an area that I have some concerns with. I'm afraid the other parties are going to start privatizing our healthcare system.
Sure.
The NDP will protect and strengthen our healthcare system because, as we saw with hydro, prices skyrocketed. We don't want the same thing happening to our healthcare. And my fourth point here, I consider myself someone who's very concerned about the environment. As a father, as an educator who works with young children, I'm worried about what our environment will be like 10, 20 years down the road. We need to address climate change. And as an MPP, if that were to be one of my pet projects, I'd be thrilled to help make sure that we do our part to address climate change here in Ontario.
Awesome.
Those are fantastic issues. Love it.
Fabulous. One of the things I want to clarify again, we 85% of our audience is American. When Pekka says hydro, he's basically talking about our electric system, our electricity system, and how it's delivered. And our production and delivery was always government owned, which we saw as an advantage. It was almost a point of pride in some ways. And as a result of a lot of things, and we could get into this, it's very political. But the Liberals and, as Pekka said, the Conservatives kind of started selling off all of those electricity assets to private companies, and our electricity prices are absolutely astronomical. It's made, added to the list of things that are really difficult for regular working class people to just get by and pay bills.
It's a top issue at the door. Any door that I knock on, everyone's talking about hydro and hydro bills.
100%.
So
we need to address that.
Hydro would be like hydroelectric dams? Is that where the term
certainly,
comes from?
that's where we get a lot of our power generation, from hydroelectric dams.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just also we just use it as a synonym for electricity in general is what we're also just saying.
Perfect.
We do have a pretty strong nuclear power program in Ontario as well. Canada makes some of the best power plants in the world. Actually, some of the safest nuclear power plants in the world. So that's something else that's another way we generate electricity in Ontario. So I have a couple issues that I want to get Pekka to address that are education specific. Being an educator and potentially, if Pekka wins, he could be deeply involved in our education system in the government. I want to ask about the York University strike. So 3,000 TAs, graduate research assistants, and contract faculty have been on strike at York University since early March. On May 7th, the government introduced back-to-work legislation and binding mediation. What are your thoughts on the strike in general, Pekka, and the legislation that was introduced this past week?
Well, what we just saw in April and May at York University is a repeat of what we saw at Georgian College here back in the fall.
Yeah.
Staff went out on strike here in the fall for 5 weeks. The governing Liberals stayed out of the entire thing. We lost 5 weeks of schooling for these kids, and many of them decided not to return back to school after the strike was ended. The Liberals imposed back-to-work legislation. They should have been involved much earlier. We saw a large number of students who decided not to return to school after that, and then missed out on opportunities to be making money working, and consequently didn't go out again after Christmas for the next term. So it was a debacle from the beginning. The Liberals failed to live up to their goals of ensuring that students and faculty have opportunities for education and work. Our faculty is also at a great disadvantage. So many of our faculty members work part-time. They're contract.
Yeah.
They go from contract to contract. They don't know until a month before the next term starts if they're going to have a job or not.
Teaching university and college isn't what it used to be.
No, my wife was teaching at Western University for many years, and it was a contract job.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give anybody, they don't like to give anybody full-time jobs either. So you get a rotation of teachers coming in and out. I don't think that's best quality for our students. So we have a contract renewal plan, and we're going to try to make many more of those contract teaching positions into full-time teaching positions. That's not only good for the staff, that's very good for the students as well, to have professionals who are there year-round and are able to meet with students and have some continuity over the years. Mm-hmm. So this is what we saw again here at York University, a repeat. The Liberals failed to help this process along. They let it go for a long time and then just put in an arbitrator and end it right there. It's just not very well handled at all.
Yeah, they don't like negotiating when the terms aren't in their favor. We've seen that a few times.
Yeah.
So, a couple weeks back, Glen and I spent some time talking about standardized testing. Mm-hmm. We went through a little bit of the way we do it, and Glen and I spoke about things like the SATs and how there's definitely a profit motive or a business motive, especially in the United States for standardized testing. And in April, a report was released, which I'm sure you saw, that had some recommendations for changes to the EQAO that included scrapping grade 3 entirely. And the NDP actually has like a super strong, well thought out position on EQAO. Maybe you can give us your personal thoughts on EQAO, the report, and the platform on EQAO for the NDP.
Well, the NDP has the thing I like about the NDP is we meet with all stakeholders when we're making big decisions. We've seen over the last 15 years the Liberals come up with a plan, they ignore various stakeholders and simply impose these plans, and it's caused many things to suffer or not, get off the ground. We have talked to all the stakeholders around EQAO, and our plan is to eliminate EQAO in the way it is right now.
Right.
Something that stakeholders have asked for is, instead of the way it is now, we look at some random sampling so that we can get some kind of a picture on as to EQAO. But that would be our plan, is to eliminate EQAO the way it is right now, and perhaps institute random testing so that we can get a small snapshot of how the kids are. But really, we need to leave this up to teachers and their professionalism. Teachers know their students the best. They can assess their students the best. We don't need to be spending $40 million a year so that we can publish a report that no one really uses. I don't see much validity to this test anymore these days at all. Do you?
No.
So I think it's a good plan to get rid of EQAO, and this report that came out in April doesn't go far enough. We need to eliminate EQAO totally the way it is right now. Other countries don't have standardized testing like this that we admire. We all look at Finland as an example, and they don't have standardized testing. They leave it to the judgment of their teachers.
Yeah,
Totally true.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the idea that we obviously want to see that students are meeting outcomes and meeting expectations, but you ask almost any educator, and they're going to tell you that a gigantic test that takes almost the whole day. If you've seen these kids, they write it. It's brutal. It's grueling. They're crying. Some of them. There's kids that are throwing up. Like, it's awful. And
the amount of time teaching to this test so that they learn how to write the test rather than content.
100%. We talked a lot about that.
We do provide report cards. Those report cards are based on provincial curriculum. So the marks of the report card reflect the provincial curriculum.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think it's time to go, and I think that's the consensus out there. Everybody is happy to see EQAO go from our schools.
Well, there you go. That's it. Pekka Reinio on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Great.
Nice chatting with you, Glen, all the way in Minnesota.
Absolutely. It was awesome. I love hearing actually the differences between, like I always tell Mike that I actually think that a lot of us that are liberals in the United States look to Canadians to your platforms, and I mean, we're inspired by you guys. I mean, the way that your entire platform, what you're talking about, we wish we had candidates that had a potential to go in and win.
Right.
That would run on these platforms because they're so important for all of the things that we care about, which are our kids, our futures, and really enjoyed listening to you.
Well, it was a pleasure to be on today, and I hope that in the future I could come back and we could talk a little bit more after the election.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Pekka.
Thank you.
On Education is an on-podcast media production. My name is Mike Washburn, and my co-host is Glen Irvin. You can get in touch with us or ask us questions to answer on air by visiting our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Glen is at Irvin Spanish on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at Mr. Washburn. Our sound engineer is Jake Codeweiss. He's on Twitter at JK Radio. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be honored if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or the Google Play Store. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost, and this helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Schoology, for supporting us. Check out Schoology.com to learn how they can help you advance what's possible. Thanks as always for listening. Stay awesome. See you soon.